through his interest and knowledge, has been able to contribute a lot to discovering the new and interesting things. Like Brian was saying, you always walk into work and find something new in the collection. It's true with the collection side of house as well. So John's about to tell us some pretty interesting things about what can be found regarding Samson fabric.
Well, this all started when I came back from taking the summer off, and Ben Sullivan, the contract photographer out at Garber, was showing me some photos that he'd done of a piece of fabric that had just been conserved here at Ozzie. And I was looking at it and said, French, what aircraft is it from? We took a look, and according to the official record, this is from a de Havilland 4, an American-built de Havilland 4. So I said, no?
Shouldn't be, not from the first Aero Squad.
No, well, the first thing I said that threw me, that had me saying no, was the camouflage, and then the Posé ou Levé EC, lift here, that's painted on there in French. And I said, I don't think so. So, but it was donated by Cord Meyer in 1961. Cord was with the 103rd and then 93rd Aero Squadrons before he was injured in a crash, which this is what he wrote down after, or when he received it. And, you know, it's not terribly easy to read, but this is most of what it says. That he received it from Robert Souberon, who said that he had received it from Mrs. Slade, who was Henrietta Thaw, who was the sister of both Bill Thaw of Lafayette and 103rd, and then First Pursuit Group, and then and of Blair Thaw. And the story was this covering was taken from the Liberty plane in which Blair Thaw was killed and Cord Meyer was injured, which put him out of the war. And it says this was the first Liberty machine used across the lines and was flown with an English squadron. Well, that description of activities is correct, except for it wasn't with that markings and so forth. It couldn't have been that plane, or the fabric from this plane, because of the French camouflage, the lift here, and the you can see the longerons markings on it. And so my first thing we did was Carl and I sent off a photo of this to Charlie, who came back and confirmed that no. That no, it does look like a French Samson with the first Aero Squadron, as John observed, markings on it, and then the form of the markings is from the earlier markings of the first Aero Squadron used. Later on, they used, and they first started using that in June of 1918. Now, at that time, Blair Thaw was with the first Aero Squadron. He was there through sometime in July 1918. And then here's the other portion. This is down in the mall, and as a result of this studies, Carl went out and managed to locate it. This was the original photo of it taken back when it was first acquired, and the fabric is extremely brittle, and this is about all Carl felt willing to do with it to get a picture of it as it is now. Although he hopes to get the conservation lab to take it on down the road, preferably sooner rather than later. But this appears to be the other side of the same thing. It was received from Soubiron's widow, and along with a number of other artifacts, and about 600 photos that were transferred from the collection to the archives. So you'll see those out, you can go upstairs and see them by appointment Tuesday through Friday. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah,
Yep.
Tuesday through Fridays.
Yeah.
I should have mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
What part of the aircraft is this taken from?
This is from the side of the fuselage.
Okay.
In fact, it's a fairly substantial chunk of the side of the fuselage covering. This is the left side, the other piece was the right side. Blair Thaw served with the first Aero, and at least one aircraft that he was flying was written off during that time period. And this is the number, and on July 26th, he took command of the 135th Aero Squadron, which was the first squadron to go operational with the American-built and American-engined de Havilland Corps. But he was killed in the crash of an American de Havilland on August 18th, which was the crash in which Cord Meyer was injured and to which was referred earlier. But Cord didn't really have any direct involvement with either of those two squadrons, so he wouldn't necessarily have known to recognize things. So, this is something, Blair Thaw's, everybody except his father and one of his brothers was also in France at the time. In fact, he was flying to Paris to meet them, and so he was in somewhat of a hurry. Now, the other thing, that there was a squadron insignia, and the 135th squadron insignia wasn't approved until September of 1918. They were the Statue of Liberty squadron, so if there's a squadron insignia, it's not 135th. This is the family line. The only way Reverend Stephen Thaw comes into it is at the memorial service in the United States. He was one of the participating officials. Benjamin Thaw Jr., who was there as the as part of the American embassy in France. Henrietta Thaw, whose husband was the Paris representative of the squadron or of an American company. Then Bill Thaw and Blair Thaw. And then the other people, Cord Meyer, who was one of the early birds, and then Catherine Thaw, Blair's and Bill's cousin, who married Cord Meyer after the war. So that explains why Cord Meyer was going along, possibly. Blair was involved in aeronautical engineering design, and the Thaw brothers were in France at the time the war broke out. Blair was underage, but that's when Bill decided to get into the war shortly after. In 1915, at about age 16, he started a company to manufacture an auto stabilizer he developed. And as soon as he was able, he joined the New York National Guard, which was one of the first aviation units in the National Guard. In 1918, he joined the 1st Aero, who were flying the Sampson 2A2. And then in July, he took command, or late in July, he took command of the 135th. And Cord Meyer was also one of the early bird, and in all likelihood knew Blair because he was a participant in the same, or in this flight from Princeton to Yale to see a football game in 1916. Both of them were participants. Then he went over to France for pursuit training, joined and then the 103rd and then the 93rd. On the fatal day, the plane that he was delivering was, according to the 135th Squadron's history, one that had been used by for evaluation by 55 Squadron RAF, and they were returning it to France, or to Paris afterwards. He took Cord Meyer along, struck telephone or telegraph wires trying to, in a forced landing. He was killed. Cord Meyer broke both legs and was out for the rest of the war. He had been warned before that there was a problem with the engine and with the seat, but he was apparently anxious to get. Contemporary reports say he was in a hurry to get to Paris to see his mother and sister. And this is my theorizing that since Catherine was also there and Cord married her after the war, that probably wanted to see her. And Blair's dog, who one member of the 135th says Blair had been warned about flying with the dog because of the dangers of the dog getting loose. Said the investigating officers thought that Bronco got caught in the tangled in the wires and may have contributed to the crash. Now, that's the only account I've seen that had that in. That incidentally came out of a folder on Blair Thaw it's one of 3 pieces of paper in that folder in the NASM archives down at the mall. And the other 2 are a letter from Benjamin Thaw returning Blair's ID to the new squadron commander, the 135th, and there was one other piece in there, but it didn't have an awful lot of help. And so, as you saw, the fabric plainly shows the longerons, which the Samson had, the DH-4 doesn't have. And there's our DH-4 down at the mall. And you can see not only no longerons on the markings, but there's this seam right there on the fuselage. And the 1st Aero Squadron had that insignia. 135th Squadron was the Statue of Liberty, and the 1st Aero Squadron didn't fly anything but the Samson from June 1918 through until they left Europe for the States in 1919. Before then, they had flown AR-1s and SPAD-11s. And this is Blair Thaw, and this is documented. This is in Garl's report in the 1st Aero Squadron history, that he had a forced landing after which a Samson was written off in July 1918. Form of the flag insignia is consistent with it. This is another Samson from 1st Aero Squadron of that period. Interestingly, according to some of the RG-120 books or documents in the National Archives that Carl found for me, this aircraft, or at least an aircraft number 10, Blair Thaw had been on at least 2 missions during late June of 1918. And this one has also got the same style 1 as the fabric that we've got, and it differs from another later 1st Aero Squadron aircraft markings that we've got another piece of in the collection, and it's got the earlier flag. And here's where I think the confusion came from, because Cord Meyer has really only got this story of the fabric third hand. It's the fabric that he got from Suberon, who got it from Blair's sister, after Bill Thaw, who might have known more accurately, had died in 1934. And also after both Blair's father and mother died in 1933 and 1931 respectively. So I think we've got here a clear case of an eyewitness to the crash who's only got second or third hand knowledge of the piece of fabric. You know, and the person, somewhere along the line, he was told, or somebody was told, that this is the fabric from Blair's crash, and they immediately assumed it was from his fatal crash, not from an earlier one. And this is another piece of fabric that was found that is part of the same Cord-Meyer collection. It's another, but this appears to be a piece from another 1st Aero Squadron plane because it's also the right-hand side. Because of the direction, you can tell by the direction of the flag. And so that's at least 2 Samsons we've got fabric from right now in the collection. And then there's this piece, which Carl said, you know, we got another Samson fabric in the over here at Garber. This is the only piece I've actually seen myself firsthand, since the other 2 pieces are one's here and the other are down at the mall. But this was donated in 1949 by a member of the 1st Aero Squadron, Joseph Bastow, who was a pilot in late October through into 1919. And you can see the different flag. They've got a eagle finial on it, and it's got a halyard on the flag as well as the post. And our accession record says it's from the first American-built aircraft to fly over enemy lines in World War I. Now, again, it's a Samson because it's 1st Aero, and it's got the longeron markings, and it's got the lift here in French. So we know it's, the record got twisted. And here's, I think, what happened on that one. The 1st Air Squadron in World War I, and the object description says taken from plane representative of the first American insignia flown in combat, which is not technically true, since the 103rd went operational in March. But somebody went from first American insignia to first American aircraft somewhere along the way. And here is, this is actually the aircraft that fabric came from. This may take a little while to come through, but there we go.
Sure it isn't a replacement? The
Look.
font is thicker.
No,
Oh, that aircraft.
that aircraft. This is, a friend of Carl's did some Photoshop work on it, and the flag lines up, the camouflage lines up. You can see this dark bit of camouflage here. The 17 is visible on the original fabric underneath the 3.
We did a tracing.
We've actually done a tracing of it. And the 17 is outlined in black, as is the 3, but they renumbered at one point in 1919 at some point. And this was my Photoshop attempt, just overlaying the color onto the original aircraft. And this is intriguing, you know. How do we keep ending up with a 17? Both on the Cord-Meyer fabric, and then on this other one, and then also Suberon's Spad, whose fabric we have also has number 17. And then Cord-Meyer's son was also involved in, or was connected to the mysterious murder of, and when you go to Google Cord-Meyer, you're likely to bring up the son first, who was with the CIA, and his wife was murdered supposedly in connection with being one of JFK's mistresses. And then Benjamin, would have been Thaw's uncle, was involved in the notable Stanford White murder in 1906. And his wife's son became an aviator and then ended up in the 103rd Pursuit Squadron during World War II. You know, so I keep coming across all these things. I was hearing Rod Serling voicing things over in the background. And then William Thaw, the grandfather to practically everybody here, was a donor to Samuel Langley, former Smithsonian secretary, before Allegheny Observatory in Pittsburgh, before he came to the Smithsonian. And then here's Suberon's 17. And when Carl found the old, or the piece of Suberon Samson fabric, he also discovered this from another Samson, and this hasn't been cataloged yet, sitting down at the mall. And this is the write-up we got from Alan Tully when we sent him the pictures of this. So he's pretty sure whose it is and where it came from. And these are the people that have been a great deal of help to me in the course of all this. Ben, the photographer, Stephen Pickman, the conservator, Carl, of course, Charlie, of course, and Alan Tully, who Carl and Charlie put me in touch with, who knows a great deal about, more than I ever hoped to have any chance of catching up with, about American aircraft, about French aircraft fabric, and the aircraft histories for the various squadrons during the war, and Gary Croman, who was the Photoshop expert. And some of the references that I used, you notice another familiar name in there. I thank you, John, for your books. Several of them came out of, or several of them I was able to refer to at the NASM library. A few of them I have for myself, and some I borrowed from Carl. And in the course of things, I was also able to check out some other things down at the NASM archives. And Brian was very helpful to me there in finding it. We pulled out a notebook that didn't actually bear into this, but it was a photo. It was a photo scrapbook of from a mechanic in the 1st Aero Squadron, pretty much from 1916 down on the Mexican border on through into 1919. And I plan to get back and take a more detailed look at that one, because it's got very interesting photos of not only 1st Aero Squadron aircraft, but assorted other aircraft, including another Fokker, or several Fokker D7s, and Breguets, and a whole general mix of aircraft in there that I'd like to try to identify and run trace on. Hey, thank you.
Questions?
Anybody have any questions?